Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Anita Brown-Graham, the Director of the Institute for Emerging Issues, and it's terrific to have our three panelists with us this morning and to have all of you out there who are participating in this webinar. We're really pretty excited about the 2014 Emerging Issues Forum, which will focus on teachers and the great economic debate. For those of you who are less familiar with the Institute, we are a public policy think and do tank focused on North Carolina's long-term prosperity. We really look at questions of economic development, but we define that pretty broadly across areas that affect health, education, the environments, and then, of course, always with the lens on the economic impact. Unlike other organizations who do this kind of work, all of our work really comes from crowdsourcing the wisdom of North Carolina's people and those beyond who have insights to share with us. So the way we go about doing our work is by bringing people together, asking them to help us identify those issues that are critical to the future of the state, and then asking them to help us figure out what the right responses are for the state of North Carolina. Today's webinar is actually the second in a series. This year, we've chosen to focus on the issue of teachers because as we've gone across the state, everyone has said the long-term competitiveness of North Carolina really is going to depend on our ability not just to have teachers or have enough teachers, but to make sure that we have the kind of quality teachers that will ensure our economy in days to come. It's interesting because many people have asked us, so help us figure out the connection between teachers and the economy. If you're an organization that wants to focus on economic development, help us determine how this connection is made. Most of these people have no question in their mind that a high quality teacher will affect student learning. What has been less focused on is how a high quality teacher affects a student's earning over their lifetime. When we look at the demand that we will expect for a high caliber workforce in North Carolina, we need not look much further than the Georgetown University's report released a few years ago suggesting that North Carolina by the year 2020 will have 61% of its new jobs created requiring a post-secondary education. In order to meet this demand, North Carolina will need to produce at least 20% more people with post-secondary degrees by the end of the decade. We won't have the students in the pipeline to go on to our community colleges and our four-year institutions if we don't graduate these students in the 12th grade, and if we can't graduate them with the skills they need. In some ways, it probably tells the entire story to point out that research indicates a good teacher is the difference between a child graduating from high school or dropping out. A good teacher is also the difference between understanding content or memorizing information, between growing up to earn a decent salary or not. In fact, these studies show that a good teacher will have students leaving their classrooms having learned as much as 3 times more material than they would have with an ineffective teacher. Good teachers produce these high-performing students will need to fill that 61% of new jobs to be created between now and 2020. Let's remember, we are at the end of 2013. We're talking about 6 years from now. But business leaders in North Carolina understand that good teachers also create wealthier consumers. If North Carolina's economy is to be jump-started, we've got to find a way to have these high-performing teachers multiply their effect so that they're raising the cumulative lifetime income of students by $80,000. Additional income to be spent on goods and services. This impact increases for each effective teacher that a student encounters. So we want to make sure that a student has an effective teacher not once in their time between kindergarten and 12th grade, but every single year. This program is really about asking the question, is it possible for North Carolina to ensure a highly effective, or what we are referring to as a world-class teacher for every student in every classroom, be it traditional, public, charter, or private? We hope you'll join us for the upcoming Emerging Issues Forum on February 10th and 11th in 2014. But we think that this webinar, and hope that you find this webinar, really serves to set the context for why this is such an important conversation to have in North Carolina, for recognizing that it's a conversation that isn't relegated to North Carolina or even the United States. This is a conversation that has been happening all over the globe. And if this state is to be globally competitive, we've got to get into the game, not just of the conversation, but of the action. So let me now, if I might, turn to our panelists. We're pretty excited this morning to introduce you to Yerki Lohima, who's the lead principal and adjunct professor at the Vicky Teacher Training School at the University of Helsinki. Yerki's extensive background includes developing teacher training programs and programs also for principals. He was recently serving as a scholar in residence in Buffalo, New York, where he was focusing on the quality of teacher education programs across the globe. We also have with us Yu A. Wang, director of the English department and a teacher of English as a second language at the Beijing Royal Foreign Language School. Originally from Beijing, Amy is currently studying for her second master's degree in educational psychology right here at NC State University. And finally, we've got Lynn Letty Homeyer, a 20-year veteran in elementary education, currently the educator and membership support coordinator for the National Public Education Support Fund. Lynn began her teaching career in Finland and later returned there on a Fulbright Fellowship studying educational best practices. She has taught all over the globe, including in Australia, Denmark, and Indonesia. Lynn, Amy, Yerki, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Yerki, special thanks to you. Our audience should know that you're in
Thank you.
Bangkok, Thailand, that the university has been closed because of the activities over the last few days. And so thank you for finding a way to connect with us this morning.
No problem. Hello, everyone.
This webinar is structured with 25 minutes of questions that I'm going to ask of the panelists, and then we're going to be sure, we promise, to leave an additional 15 minutes for audience questions. All of our participants are muted to avoid echoes on the call webinar, but you can submit your questions by using the chat feature. Feel free to go ahead and send them even during the panel discussion. We'll hold them for the question and answer portion. To give some context to these questions I'm going to be asking of the panelists, you should know that this fall, IEI convened a group of stakeholders from across the state and asked them to help us identify the most important issues to address if North Carolina were to be serious about putting a world-class teacher in every classroom. They pointed us to 4 critical areas of work. The first, elevating the status of the teaching profession in this state. The second, developing high performance standards for the teaching profession, beginning from entry and ending at retirement. The third, offering a competitive compensation system with differentiated options. And the fourth, providing high quality and relevant professional development to our teachers. I want to talk about each of these issues in turn, starting with the ever so important issue of elevating the status of teaching. To begin, let me ask you to take a look at the results of a survey done across countries asking citizens about the status of teachers. 4 factors were analyzed to determine these status rankings, including the profile of teacher respect, teaching as a sought-after profession, contextual understanding of a teacher's societal status, and views of pupils' respect for teachers. Amy, let me ask you this first question because China has the highest score. And I wonder if you might tell our audience a little bit more about how teachers are viewed in your home country and how this is compared to other professions.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Uh, Honestly, this result is really surprising to me. But I have to admit that teachers in China are generally well respected. And but comparatively, teachers are not that respected as when I was in school. And the teacher's job is not valued as it should be. So if we talk about teachers teaching K to 12, it seems like the teachers who are teaching high grades receive more respect and they enjoy higher societal status.
So, Amy, I wonder if I could go to you next. It's interesting um, to think about this perhaps being a generational thing, particularly as we're focusing on whether there are policies or programs or other initiatives that a state like North Carolina might do. So, I was struck, Amy, last summer, we actually had two students who spent some time in our home for a summer program, and they both were just committed to going out and getting gifts for their teachers, which I found to be a little surprising because my own children have never traveled and thought it was that important to go out and be sure that they brought something home for their teachers. But one of the things that struck me as interesting is one of them wanted to be a teacher, and she talked about the profession with a level of regard that I just thought was unusual. So are there regional differences? Does it depend on the kind of school a student goes to? What do you think accounts for these scores and then the dissonance with your own experience?
Okay, some students would like to be teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Probably when they graduate from universities, they think this is the easy start.
Liz, if you wouldn't mind picking up from here, you've worked in schools within the US as well as several of other countries. What would you share with the audience in regards to how different countries and cultures elevate the status of teachers or not?
I think it's a value within the society. So, for example, when I taught in Finland, the teaching profession was a highly regarded profession that people would continue throughout their work career as a teacher. I'm originally from Minnesota, and I would say geographically speaking, in the United States, there's really been a focus on, to use very simplistic word, good teacher, bad teacher. But I would say that the majority, if we look at the 60% of effective educators in our system, are really using this as a lifetime career. So, for example, in Minnesota, I would say that the teaching profession was very highly regarded, and people really went into the profession knowing it would be a career lifetime. I would say working in an urban area of Washington, D.C. for D.C. public schools, I think you could actually look at other urban districts throughout the United States, where maybe it was more of a starter profession where people went into the teaching career only as a means to get elsewhere. But again, there's many people within my urban district of DC Public Schools that are very committed to the classroom and have chosen that to be a lifetime career.
And I wonder if you might just pick up on the point Amy made earlier about a, a sense that the profession is being seen with declining status. I was interested this summer, had a chance to be in Denmark, and one of the things the Danes talked a lot about was that they thought teachers used to be revered, and now the profession not as revered. Is this sort of a global issue?
Well, Anita, I think again, it's a societal value, but it's also what we hear in the press. So again, if we just if we simplify things again to just using words like good teacher or bad teacher, then we're really, to me, demeaning the profession because, again, those are very simplistic terms to talk about a profession that's very complicated and very nuanced. So again, I think it really goes back to the elevation within the society. And I look to Jyrki because we know that the teaching profession is highly regarded within the country of Finland and within the Finnish society.
So Jyrki, let's go to you. What's so magical about teaching in Finland?
It is about what kind of teacher you are. According to our polls, the most popular ones are regarded to be classroom or class teachers. They are in top 5, top 6 every year in polls when people are asked what is the most popular profession of the country. Even though they have quite a medium salary, but they have independent status in a classroom situation, and they have freedom to have a choice on their methodologies. They do a lot of planning with themselves, and after all, they are masters of education sciences already in primary level, and I would say subject teachers are not so popular as such. Much lower ranking is, for example, a principal, a school principal. So it is depending on what kind of teaching you are doing.
So,
And yeah, and how much cooperation you do with the parents, for example.
so Jyrki, you've talked about it depending on what kind of teacher you are. And Lynn, I'm really struck by your focusing us in on this issue of good teacher, bad teacher, and labels that may or may not really help us to understand the role of teachers and certainly may have adverse effects on the way we think about the profession of teaching. So let's go to this other issue of high performance standards, because I was really struck to hear our diverse group of stakeholders say, look, we have to, as a culture, understand more of what teaching means, and we need to be more supportive of it, but we also need to set standards. It's going to be important for people to feel like they understand what's in the marketplace, for want of a better characterization. So let me start with you here, Amy. When you look at how entry standards into teaching differ from country to country, what are the entry standards or requirements into schools of education in your country, and do other professions share the same requirements and standards?
I don't think there are any specific requirements for one to go to the school of education. It totally depends on what kind of universities you are applying for. Like, for example, it's of course more competitive to apply for the national top universities than the local universities or colleges. But compared to other professions, I think it's easier for one to apply for education schools than professions like computer science, doctor, or lawyer, or these kind of things. And also, if you want to be a teacher when you graduate, of course you need a bachelor degree at least, and also you need a teacher's license. Of course, masters are preferred.
Got it. So Lynn, is this true in your experience that the entry standards are different than they are for other professions? And what response do you have for how that might affect the way people view the profession?
Well, being a veteran educator, I entered the profession almost 20 years ago by going to a state university within Minnesota. I felt that my training was exceptional. And it really prepared me to go into the classroom as an effective educator. But I think, for me, I think a determination was that I continued in the classroom so that my trade and my skill as an educator and as a professional educator became better and better. Since moving out to an urban area, there's many entrances into the teaching profession now. And I just want to clarify one point. I've been reprimanded for using the word traditional entrance, meaning a college profession. I've been reminded by my colleagues in the university world to use clinical-based approach to teaching. And I really like that that differentiation between traditional and clinical, because of course a university degree really is a clinical research-based approach into pedagogy and into the practice of teaching. Many of my colleagues, however, out here in Washington, D.C., have acquired excellent preparation by going through what we call an alternative license program, a program that really has trained them well through a residency model and continued working with their educators. So again, there's many different approaches to the classroom. My own caveat as a veteran educator would be time in the classroom, so that you really hone your skills as an educator through the years of teaching in a classroom, and not just through a very fleeting attempt of being in a classroom. It does take time to hone the skills.
Got it. So Yerke, would you pick up there and talk to us about entry standards, and then talk about high standards over time, and how you keep those standards as you have more experience as a teacher?
First of all, it's very difficult to get into a class teacher education in any universities, and we only have 10 to 11 universities with teacher education departments. And for example, Helsinki University had 1,200 applicants, being good students from high schools all around the country, and the intake number only was 120. So year after year, we may take the best ones of all applicants. And that is explained in several ways, but I would say first there comes a respect, then there comes an awareness of what is being a teacher, and third there comes the kind of desire to get a good education and master's degree in teacher education. And those ones who apply for class teacher education, they initially want to become teachers, unlike subject teachers who may apply after their major studies in other subjects and end up via pedagogical studies to become teachers. So it is slightly different again, depending on what kind of teacher and teacher's career you are having. And second, the standards, then high quality is assessed and regarded to be a process more than an outcome. And instead of teaching, we are very much focusing on lifelong learning and overall learning skills. And that might make a big difference between some other countries.
So let me stay with you here, Yerke, because you've talked a little bit about the selectivity of people going into the profession, and then the process for evaluation as they remain in the profession. Of course, it's a two-sided coin. So you got high standards that probably is going to demand higher compensation. In North Carolina, teachers are paid on a statewide salary schedule where salary increases are based on years of experience. It used to be on advanced degrees or certifications such as national boards. Can you tell us how this compares to how teacher salaries are calculated in your home country, and whether any of these factors impact the amount a teacher is paid? The years of experience, the grade levels taught, the subjects taught, student performance you just mentioned as an evaluative matter, but does that affect the pay rate, or whether it's a public versus private school?
In the case of Finland, we mainly talk about public education, which is organized by municipalities, and their salary on teaching sector then comprises from the experience as well as North Carolina. We only have performance-based salary system in our universities and, for example, in the training schools. But learning outcomes or scoring is not included in the salary. You may have more lessons, of course, if you want to and you are paid for them. But after all, teaching very much is an average salary-based job, being a teacher in a basic education. High schools then make a bit better salaries. I would say that we don't have teachers ranking lists at all.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that for me, please, Yerki? I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I would say that we don't have teachers ranking lists at all.
Okay, gotcha. So, Lynn, can I turn to you to talk a little bit about your experience as you've seen teacher compensation done in different ways in different countries? What are the factors?
Well, it's really interesting, Anita, because again, in Finland, it's such a revered profession that you don't at all have any type of teacher evaluations. And I would even venture, Jyrki, you can back me up on this, that it would even be, or I've been told by a Finn, the Finnish Ministry of Education, that it's actually immoral to judge or place any type of judgment based on a child's test score. That would be absolutely forbidden to do any type of teacher compensation based on a child's performance. Education for the Finn kid is all about the child. So they would never want to put any dollar amount on a child's education. Anita, I think the one situation that we're dealing with here in the States is if you're in an underserved community, you know, again, you know, what is your, you know, what is the quality of the child's education if you're basing, you know, the compensation of a teacher based on their test scores, on a child's test scores? So again, there's such a range and fluctuation between underserved communities about the taxing structure of that particular community, the money going back into the local school. So I feel like we have a very schizophrenic system in the United States. And again, as a teacher, I think it goes back to, is one child worth more if we just say that child is basically you know, based on their test scores. So to me, it really gets into ethical and moral questions about how we educate children. And my personal belief is a child should never be a test number. We should educate the child who they are, where they're coming from, and of course educate them to the best possible standards. But that's just my own personal belief about equating test scores with compensation. I think it gets to be a very slippery slope.
So I don't disagree with that at all, Lynn, but I'm really taken with how many teachers we've met in this work who have pointed out that for as effective as they are in the classroom and for as much as they love being in the classroom, the only way to really get a significant bump in salary is to leave the classroom and go into administration. So if we want to stem that tide, we have to have some way of differentiating those master teachers and paying them as such. And what factors would you suggest we look at?
I think it just goes back to the whole school financing argument. I mean, look at what the state of Colorado tried to do with just restructuring the whole school financing system. So I actually think it goes down that particular path. We have to examine that particular path in addition to other items. Jyrki, I'm curious what you were, if my earlier attitude to the commentary about the Finns were correct. But Anita, that was I think we really need to look at the whole school financing issue. It's very complicated. It's very muddy. It's not easy. But again, it's not easy at all.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think we're all struggling and scratching our heads and trying to find something that's actually fair and an accurate assessment. And I think all of the factors you've pointed out confound our efforts to do that. But we're still challenged to figure something out. Yerke, did you want to respond at all to Lynn's assessment?
Yeah, assessment as such, we don't have so much tests in our basic education, so it practically is impossible to create any lists either. So it is not about testing our test scores or, let's say, high school matriculation test outcomes. No, it's more or less the activity you as a teacher are performing in your institutional and learning environment. And I would repeat it again, is about learning and not so much about traditional teaching we are talking about.
Thank you. Amy,
Hi.
how are teachers paid compared to other professions in China, and what factors go into determining a teacher's pay?
I think we have to make difference between public schools and private schools. Teachers in public schools, their salaries are based on years of experience and advanced degrees, as you mentioned. While in private schools, probably your abilities and the contribution to the schools will be considered very important. And for both public and private schools, the you know if the students are going to be tested on the national standardized tests, then it's likely the subject you teach, the teachers will get more salaries. And if the students do very well in your class, whether you are teaching in private or public schools, you will get kind of bonus at the end of school year. And I think compared to other professions like IT engineer, doctors, lawyers, I don't think the teachers' compensation is that competitive.
Gotcha. Amy, let me stay with you for a second as we go to the fourth critical factor that our working group identified, which was the need for high quality and relevant professional development. Everybody has said, in fact, Lynn, I'm really glad that you raised this as you talked about. It took time, and over time, we want to ensure not just that our teachers are getting the classroom experiences that help them, but that we are investing in their professional development in ways that support them. So can you talk a little bit about how professional development is supported in China and what kinds of professional development opportunities exist?
Okay, I think there are three levels of professional development. Number one, there is something we can do within the school. For example, in my school, we have a teachers reading club. We share books we read together every week, and also we would like to invite some professionals or teachers from other schools or university professors to give us lectures regularly. And in the district level, yeah, they have kind of program to give teachers kind of training during summer or winter vacation. Well, what is amazing is that since I'm working in a private school, our general principal, Mr. Wang Guangfa, has been continuously invested in teachers' professional development. We have a very close partnership and cooperation with North Carolina State University, Chapel Hill UNC, and Harvard. We have all kinds of trainings. We invite professors from these schools to give us lectures or trainings which we need or require. And also the best thing is that every year our schools send a number of teachers to study for a year or 1 year and a half for a master's degree. That is what I'm doing here.
Thank you. Lynn, professional development, what ways have you seen it offered and funded? It sounds from Amy's experience, a lot of it happens at the school level in a private school. We know in North Carolina that some of the funding really is happening at the teacher level. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I've only worked for public schools throughout my time in teaching, and I think the most important thing is, again, it's not the individual teacher in the classroom, but it's really a group of teachers at a school level that are coming together, rallying around a certain a topic to improve themselves. I think the frustration for most classroom teachers would be a very disjointed professional development just to fulfill the topic of I've done my professional development for the year. I know in my particular school in District of Columbia Public Schools, we had an amazing professional development around Singapore math. So that was our particular curriculum. And so all things were around Singapore math. We also had a very vibrant and very rigorous professional development in collaboration with Teachers College in New York. So again, it's these type of entities or activities that really are embraced by the entire school and really builds up the content knowledge, the professionality within the teaching staff. So I always like to look at professional development, not so much from just an isolated individual teacher's perspective, but something that's a collective good from within the school community.
Yurki, would you pick up on that theme for us? Talk a little bit about how professional development is supported in Finland, and is it focused on the individual teacher or teams of teachers or all the teachers in a particular school? Just help us understand the support mechanisms in place for helping teachers to stay.
First of all, we need to remember that in Finland, teachers do their school-based curriculum by themselves. So that's one area of professional development and in-service training as well. We focus on curricular work. Second, there are annual in-service training days that are school-based as well, and then if we go to a more institutional level, in my institution, instead of traditional content knowledge in service training or development, we rather urge teachers to go for research, since we try to offer research-based teaching in all levels. And second, we are focusing in our projects on the skills, and I would name them to be 21st century learning skills. And it takes place at your weekly timetable, or as many teachers then voluntarily do it, it goes on your summer holidays. And in our country they have 10 weeks of summer holidays, and very many of them go abroad and study all by themselves, in addition to the previously mentioned activities.
You talked about the weekly time, and I want to ask you to just help us understand what a day in the life of a teacher in Finland looks like. How much time is spent in front of students in the classroom, how much time is spent in preparation and in professional development activities. While you're thinking about that, let me just remind those of you on the webinar, this is going to be my last question, so if you've got questions for the panelists, please go ahead and send them in. Okay, Yarki.
Okay, average working day at school is from 3 to 6 hours per day, and I'm talking about lessons. And planning then is very individual. I can't give you exact numbers. We have studied teachers' week to be from 40 to 60 hours, working hours when it is a so-called rush hour time in, let's say, before Christmas, for example, and in early May. The average teaching load goes from 15 to 24 per week. And our teachers, they only work 190 days per year, as Lynn very well knows, and then they have the rest for their own.
Lynn, do you know how that compares to the day in the life of an average teacher in the U.S.?
Well, Anita, I'll give my own personal experience. So when I worked in Finland in an elementary school in a dual language program, there were some days that I was with the children from 9 o'clock in the morning until noon, 9 o'clock until 1, and then I would have time to do my lessons, my own classroom preparations in the afternoon. As opposed to being an elementary school science teacher here in the United States, I would teach 6 45-minute preps and have actually one 45-minute period during the day for me to prepare my lessons. Now, of course, being as what were my colleagues, being industrious, that would mean that I would come in much earlier in the day before the day began with students and stay much later in the afternoon until 6:30, 7 o'clock to make sure that my science labs were prepared for the next day, to make sure that I had all my materials, to make sure that I did grading. So the classroom teacher works really hard. At least that's always been my experience with the colleagues that I have worked with, either in Minnesota or here at DC Public Schools. It's a long, long, long day. And that's just preparing lessons so that when kids come in, we are ready to go with their studies.
Thanks, Lynn. Amy, you want to say a little bit about the day in your life when you're not here at NC State in the classroom?
Okay, as a teacher, yes, we spend a lot of time with the kids, especially when you teach elementary kids. They are young, they always need someone to be with them. And as a teacher, averagely you teach 3 classes or 4 in a day, and in the rest of the time, for example, you have to lead the kids to do some activities outside, and also we organize all kinds of activities like spelling bee, singing contest, speaking contest, or debating. All these kind of things cost us a lot of time, and we need to do grading, correcting the homework, and also we spend time, one-on-one tutoring students who have questions or problems. I don't think teachers have much time to prepare lessons in the office. That's why they have to work after they leave school. And since for those who are working in boarding schools, they are having even longer days. For example, in our school, some classes, the students live on campus from Monday to Friday. That means after supper, the teachers need to stay with the kids for about 2 hours for evening classes. So it's very stressing, actually.
So we have a question that's come in from a teacher in Chatham County who is making exactly the point you've just made, Amy, that salary is one aspect of support, but workload, opportunities for planning time, all of that is equally important. He also asks about benefits, and I wonder if any of you are prepared to talk a little bit about the kind of benefits beyond the actual pay that you get, whether that's healthcare, retirement, support for young children, whatever the benefits might be that make up the total compensation package.
I think in China, the public school teachers benefit a lot from like healthcare, insurance, retirement pension, everything. I think everything is covered. But for private schools, I think it just depends on the administration, because the government never give any funding or money to the schools. The policies are made by the private school administration. And although I have to say that teachers working in private schools get well, better paid when they are working, but I don't know what happens when they retire from private schools.
Lynn, you want to talk generally about public schools in the United States and what overall compensation packages look like? It's actually an interesting point of contention from time to time and state to state.
Yeah. Well, just from my experience living in Minnesota and working for DC Public Schools, I actually have a really, really, really great teacher retirement package when I eventually retire from the system. Great health care benefits. I just want to say though, when I was in Finland, I also had those things. However, being in Scandinavia, and I think we can look at Finland, Norway, Sweden, they all have I guess I would call it the Scandinavian welfare state. So at a very minimal cost, not only I, but also children had excellent access to health care. And I think I would also say this, that unfortunately a lot of kids within the system that I work here in DC may not always have access to great health care. So again, as a teacher, I have those great benefits. I always worry though about whether my students have the same access to the benefits that I have, access to health care, to dental care.
Thank you. I want to end with this question for you all. We've heard from a lot of advocates within education and certainly from teachers themselves, this deep desire to have more ownership over setting standards for the profession. And so I don't want to leave this webinar without hearing from you all whatever feedback, insights you might offer to teachers who want to have more of a say in how the profession is seen, evaluated, and elevated. And I'll start with you, Amy.
Okay. Could you please put the question more specifically to me?
Sure. So teachers here in North Carolina, and this is actually a question that's come up from the audience, but it's something we've heard quite a bit in the last 6 months, want to feel that they have more say in how they are evaluated and how the profession is elevated. How much say do teachers in China have about the future of the profession?
Okay, for teacher evaluation, it is always a complicated issue and it is very sensitive because whenever time we do teacher evaluation, that means teacher's salary or benefit will be based on that. In China, the teacher evaluation is really political. I mean, top down. Teachers are mainly evaluated by the administration, but also, of course, we will conduct student survey, or we would like to collect peer evaluation. But what is most important is the evaluation from administration. Like, for example, the principals, directors would like to go observe teachers' class regularly, and they will look at the students' achievement, the test scores. And also teachers like education backgrounds will be considered too. I don't think teachers themselves have much say in the evaluation or the professional development. I don't think so.
So Jyrki, the same question for you. If Finland really stands as a star in terms of how teachers are viewed, are teachers really pushing that, or is it, as Amy said, still a fairly top-down system?
Well, I would say it is more in terms of shared leadership in Finland. Principals do not go and follow any teaching in the teachers' classrooms, but it is in terms of sharing the leadership and responsibility and assessment and orders. They are not so familiar for us. We trust on our teachers and we trust on our students as well, and it gives them a huge, I would say, feeling and responsibility in the freedom they have in planning and curricular work also. So they really are. They are facilitating their own job, own profession, and they are also facilitating, I would say, hand in hand with the head teachers, their own professional development. So there's a sense of freedom, shared leadership, and I would say freedom to plan as you like, and freedom of not to get assessed the way you don't like.
Lynn, so you,
Anita, I think Yerke just said the golden word
I could
about
see you
trust.
smiling all the way
Okay.
through the camera. Yes, please respond.
Well, two things is I really am taken with the word evaluation and elevation, and I'm not quite sure if you have. I really believe that if you have a very punitive type of teacher evaluation system, I don't think you can have an elevation of the career just because, like Yerke said, you don't have the trust. I remember telling one of my colleagues in Finland that I was evaluated by someone I did not know that came into my classroom with a clipboard and a very simplistic 1 through 4 type of metric system evaluated my teaching. And the Finnish teacher was absolutely amazed and aghast by saying, I would never let that happen. Like nobody would ever be able to evaluate my professionality based by holding a clipboard. So again, I think the teaching career is more nuanced than just a simplistic system. And I've heard really dynamic teacher evaluation systems that are in place throughout the United States. But that's only happened, Anita, when the teachers have been involved with creating that type of collaborative system. So I think we need to go back to Yerke's trust, freedom, and I think that it will empower the teacher, and that will elevate the profession.
So, talk to us a little bit more, Lynn, about what that would look like, because I think you can fully understand. We're going to have this Emerging Issues Forum in February, and we expect to have 1,000 to 1,200 people sitting in the convention center, and most of them will not be teachers. You'll have business leaders who will think to themselves, but of course, I evaluate my colleagues all the time. That's how I determine who gets big bonuses or big raises. What, what would a system look like that delivers the kind of accountability that these decision makers will be looking for, but also offers the kind of trust and support and flexibility and nuance that you and Yerke have all said are so important?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first question I would ask is a school system with, again, precious children that are coming into the system at early or kindergarten, first grade, all the way through 12th grade in North Carolina, can we equate this system like a business? So that's just a question. I'm not giving any answer to that. And then the second thing is I would highly recommend a book that has really spurred my thinking and challenged my thinking, called Professional Capital. It's by Michael Fullan and Andy Hargraves, and it really talks about, again, this system of education, that it's not isolated teachers out there in the classroom, but it's this entire system, whether it be a school, who's a part of a school district, who's a part of a state entity. So again, I don't think that I said I wasn't going to answer the question, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Go for it.
Yeah. Can we, should a school be run like a business model? And that's a question that I have. But I'm not advertising. I'm just saying that this has been a really, really timely book for me. And it talks about a system of education, and then find out if it equates it to that business model.
And would you repeat the title and the authors, because I assume that book sales are going to go up after this webinar, and I want you to be able to get your agent's fee.
No, absolutely not. I'm only a teacher. Just a cup of coffee and a donut would be fine. Andy Hargraves, Michael Fullan, Professional Capital. again, really talking about the collaboration that a school district needs in really capturing and retaining a cohort of educators that are committed to that particular community.
Thank you. Amy, Yerke, any final thoughts on this issue of giving teachers more voice? I think Lynn has really pointed out the tension inherent in this work, and it obviously is a tension we're going to spend a little bit of time wrestling with at the Emerging Issues Forum. Final thoughts? Can you unmute?
I would say that if we try to formalize
the notion of school and business, I'm afraid that.
Okay, would you hold for a second, please? Let's go to Yerke first, and then we'll come to you, Amy.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking about the system, as Lynn said, the system and structures, they should be assessed instead of teachers. And if we think that learning could be formalized and learning could be assessed and learning could be controlled in a way or other, then we might get a concentrated and hierarchical system for that, and in a way control everything that is needed. But if we think that learning just takes place regardless of good or bad teachers, then there should be a lot of freedom in a learning institution and learning organization, such as any school is.
Thank you. Amy, final words?
Okay, thank you. As I just mentioned that I'm very glad Lynn mentioned the issue of business, but I'm afraid now in China, many schools, especially the private schools, are operating like business, which is really sad. And also some public schools are following because of benefits. And also that I like the notion of professionalism. Well, if I really want our teachers to be able to put their voice in the teacher evaluation curriculum and their teaching in the classroom. But personal, I think it takes a little bit of time for the teachers to learn to be professional, to be more professional, and to learn how to put their voice effectively in those decisions.
Thank you, Amy. I asked my colleagues to put up this slide comparing teacher quality internationally. We've spent our time in the past hour thinking about how things happen here in North Carolina and comparing that to other nations and other districts in the United States. It probably goes without saying that more and more our policymakers are going to be turning to charts like this. For those of you who are watching the screen, what we've got up here are our most recent PISA scores, which demonstrates that when compared internationally to 70 of the world's top economies, American students ranked 31st in mathematical benchmarks and 23rd in science. Finland ranked 6th in math and 2nd in science. Students in Shanghai, China ranked 1st in both. Now, I know that I've got quite a few educators out there on the webinar, and I'm sure some of them are screaming, yeah, but North Carolina 7th graders did better than Finland, and so I want to make sure that I acknowledge that, so you don't have to call me and remind me. I already know. The point I want to make, though, is this really is a global talent development issue. And there are things to be learned from both the good things and the mistakes that may be happening elsewhere. This webinar is one opportunity, we hope, to start getting North Carolina to think about promising practices, that might be helpful and supportive of the teachers here in the state. But I think I want to end with this point that all three of you have made so powerfully, at least for me, which is a conversation about teachers needs to involve teachers, perhaps even be powered by teachers. I'm really hopeful that for those educators who are participating in this webinar, you will be part of our conversation come February. We're going to underwrite the cost of teachers from every school district, from every county, certainly from not just public traditional schools, but our charter schools and our private schools to be part of this conversation. But the truth is, it's not enough for you just to be in it. I'm hopeful that you will be helping to lead it. Let me thank the three educators we've got on this panel this morning. We really appreciate you getting started. Yorkie, we particularly appreciate, given all that's going on, that you somehow found a way to stay connected with us. And we will be watching the news and thinking about you and hoping things calm down and that the university reopens soon. Amy,
Thank you.
Maria, appreciate you both for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anita.
Yes, the pleasure is mine. Thank you.